Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the APPA Agora. I am your host, as some of you know. I'm Lou Marinoff, and very pleased to welcome Lydia Amir as our special guest today. Hi, Lydia. Hi, Ida. Hello. Allow me, please, to introduce our special guest, our featured guest today, Lydia Amir. As many of you may know, and perhaps some of you do not, but you will now find out that she is a French-Israeli professor of philosophy, currently teaching in the Department of Philosophy at Tufts University in Massachusetts, and at graduate programs of philosophy in Romania and Mexico. She also serves as a research fellow in the Institute of Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences at Beijing Normal University at Zhuhai, China. Lydia has worked as a philosophical practitioner for the last 30 years. She is president of the Israeli Association for Philosophical Practice, a director of the American Philosophical Practitioners Association, founding president of the International Association for the Philosophy of Humor, and member of various academic boards and committees. In addition to many articles and essays, Amir has published 7 books and is working under contract on several additional manuscripts. A board member of various journals, she serves as editor of 2 journals, one of which she founded, along with 3 book series, notably the Lexington Series in Philosophical Practice. So welcome, Lydia. Please unmute yourself, and welcome to the APPA Agora. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Lou, for inviting me. Thank you for all the people. Those in Europe, it's very late. I think it's 10 o'clock in the evening, and I see Ida, that I haven't seen for years. And hello, Ida. And I see Alexander Fatih also from Serbia. And I see a friend from Israel, Orly, and my friend here, Hortensia Pella, also professor of philosophy from the other room, but she could not enter. She's from Mexico, and she would be listening. And thank you for all the other people. I know most of you, and I'm very glad that you found the time to be here. And thank you, Lou, for inviting me. That's very kind of you.
Well, Lydia, you know, we go back a long way already. It's 30 years that you've been practicing, and we met 29 years ago. We met in 1994. It's almost 30 years.
Yes.
So it's been an incredible journey. So first of all, tell us a little bit. Let's go back before you got into philosophical practice. You were already involved in philosophy. You did a PhD in philosophy. Could you tell us about your formative training in philosophy, please?
Yes, I've chosen philosophy out of a few options. I was a mathematician and a musician, and I wanted to study both mathematics and music, but both departments refused because these were majors. So 2 majors together was impossible, apparently. So I had to choose. I had to use the philosophic process to decide between mathematics and music, what is more important. And I chose mathematics. And then just to spite them off, I added philosophy. And what you know, after 1 year on mathematics and philosophy, I decided that it's the philosophy of mathematics that interests me. And so I wanted to study only philosophy, but nobody could teach me philosophy of mathematics. I ended up teaching the first course like that at that university. There was no one either in mathematics or in philosophy. And so I went into philosophy of science and epistemology for that, only to learn that no one can help me, and also philosophy of religion. And then I did directly my PhD. I studied for the master, but without master. In the United States, it's quite common. In Israel, it wasn't so common. I was the first to receive that at my university, the direct PhD program. And I wrote my PhD on personal redemption, or if you want, liberation, according to Spinoza and Nietzsche. So I was interested in liberty and the capacity of philosophy to liberate those who take the time to study it. And I was teaching for 6 years at Tel Aviv University at that time, and then immediately somewhere else, and immediately somewhere else. And so I never stopped teaching from the age of 24. I began my studies at the age of 21 because I had to go to the army in Israel. So I served there, and I'm a lieutenant in the Israeli army. Today, it's not such a nice thing to say, but in the past it was. And that's all. So I studied 10 years, and out of them, I already taught 6.
Fantastic. And about the music, what did you have a specific instrument?
Yes, I come from a musical family, and my grandfather from Moscow was a pianist and a composer out of the Conservatory of Music of Moscow. And he was my first teacher at the age of 6. He was already in Paris. My father was also a pianist, and I was trained for classical music. To be a pianist in classical music, I was prepared to enter the Academy of Music in Paris. Actually, when I decided to go back to Israel and then to go to the army, and my professor of piano in Paris said that I could come back after the army, but the army changed me, and then I was already in philosophy. So I decided to keep the music it's not even a hobby, it's a very strong passion. To this day, I think I understand music better than anything else. And I was already composing from the age of 8 to 10. So I wanted to go to the Academy of Music to learn composition. I still intend to do this when I retire. But in the United States and Canada, they don't let you retire. So we'll see.
Well, I don't believe you're ever going to retire, Lydia. I don't think it's in your DNA. Just like me, we're going to keep at it because I think you love what you do, and you are loved for what you do. So why would you ever retire? But it's interesting. Again, we've known each other since 1994. That's almost 30 years. We've never talked about music or mathematics. We always talk about philosophy, and there's no end to that. But I would love to have a conversation with you at some point when we meet again. Maybe next month or very shortly, we'll be in Romania together. And I would love to talk to you about music and mathematics. Who's your favorite composer? Do you have a favorite composer?
Yes, I have a favorite composer. It depends for what. I wished I could write like Beethoven, but I don't. The best I can do is something like Brahms. It's a little bit baroque and complex or whatever. And so it depends on what. There are some things vocal that I prefer Verdi. Some things I like the piano sonata of Beethoven. I like Liszt also. All of them use the piano differently, So I was also teaching piano when I was a student. And you know what? I was specializing in teaching piano to older persons who would say, I always dreamed I would play piano. And I would say, why not try it now? If you can drive, I can teach you piano. And I was doing that. And once I had a mathematician, he said, all I want is this prelude of Rachmaninoff, only that. And I said, okay. So we did that. And I have still my piano of the age of 16, a big piano in my apartment, which I'm dragging from one place to another. Yes.
Well, I've got to hear you play sometime because I've never heard you play either. If you compare yourself to Brahms, that's not too bad either. There was only one Beethoven, but there was also only one Brahms, and I mean that's pretty good taste. Which, by the way, I share. So we have to have a more developed conversation about music and composition, particularly in the 19th century. When we meet again, okay? Because that's.
But I have a challenge for you, Lou, because I was once approached by a composer who was sharing my apartment when I was a student in Tel Aviv, and he became a great composer. And he said, there are no philosophic texts to which music is written, only poems. Why won't we do something together? So I had this idea to create an opera about the life and death of Socrates, and I went to visit him in Pittsburgh, but he had twins, so we didn't do that. We can do that, Lou. We can take philosophic text and compose together music for them, and then let philosophy be known in that way as well.
Well, I think you credit me with a little bit too much talent, Lydia. I am, as you know, a guitarist and a classically trained one, but I certainly have never aspired to compose an opera. However, if you insist, we'll certainly pursue the idea. I'm always thrilled to collaborate with you, and collaborating in music would be a very interesting project. So
Yes.
thank you for keeping me in mind. Let me
And
ask you something else. Ever since I've known you, you have been very peripatetic. You are one of the most traveled philosophers whom I know, and certainly in the movement. You appear everywhere. You and Aura, in fact, are the only two who have been to every single ICPP, which is quite remarkable. Since 1994 to the present, you haven't missed one. Every time I email with you, you're either on your way someplace or coming back from someplace. You're constantly on the move. How do you manage to be so productive and so well traveled at the same time?
I don't know how to answer that. Well, I travel with my computer, so I think this is this is the main thing, and I really don't know. You know, I was born not in Israel. I was born in Paris, and then my father, he likes to travel, and he became an Israeli diplomat. So we were used to change countries, and within the countries, you would travel every weekend, and on the holidays, long travels. So I think I got accustomed to that. Till the age of 21, I never stayed more than 2 or 3 years in the same apartment. So then I stayed in Israel almost 20 years without leaving. And then my first nature came back, and I began to travel, and everybody helped me. Poor Ida had me on her floor. I was sick. I was eating all her cheese. I didn't have any manners. You know, I got, she got me a doctor. I was educated, and I was brought up by powerful and loving women all over the world. Really, Ida, and in Oslo, Pia, and even Roxanne in Buenos Aires. And you hosted me, and you know, people were kind to me. And from these conferences, from this, I don't know, in Israel, they say, you are from the world. It's normal that you live there. So I think I need a variety of people. I need a variety of languages, of opinions. I have taught in many different places. So I think globally in terms of philosophy, of what I offer. And I need to be in the places. It's not the same to read as to experience what the place gives you. And the intimacy with the people. You know, it's not enough to be in Amsterdam. You have to stay with Ida. You have to talk with Ida every night. You understand? You have to stay with the Scandinavians. They are deeply soothing. You have to stay with the Spanish people. Something else, you know, unless you do that, you have no idea what you're talking about in philosophy, I think. You know, Socrates thought he knew, but I think he was terrified of traveling. This is why he chose death over exile.
That's an interesting thesis. You have to do some kind of posthumous psychoanalysis to defend that position. But you are not a tourist. No one can ever accuse you, if that's, you know, a pejorative, of being a tourist. You always are ensconced in the culture. I've seen you in enough countries. We've been together in enough different countries and cultures to know you're always well received. You are maybe, is it your nature, or is it because also your father was a diplomat, that you are very diplomatic? You get along with everybody, Lydia. Even people who are difficult to get along with you. Do you think that's part of your nature, or is it something you learn through travels?
You know, it's very interesting that you say that, because I'm not diplomatic. I get along, but I only tell the truth, and I have not much tact. You know, I don't say what people expect me to say. I say the truth, you know, but because naturally I'm hesitant, maybe it's not the whole truth, maybe it's the way I see it, maybe because I'm a skeptic, I don't know. So it's very nice what you're saying. I have no idea if I'm well accepted or not. Really, I have no idea, but I never heard someone say that I'm diplomatic. I heard that I'm aggressive. I heard many other things, but it's true that I managed to get along with all this great personality of the philosophical practice movement, which is not easy, you know, those people who could not get along. And this movement is so special because it attracted big personalities.
Yes.
And yes, and discussions that were much more personal than in only professional, narrow philosophical discussions. So it enabled you to create deeper bonds with everybody. And this was a fantastic gift.
I share that view with you, Lydia, because actually, notwithstanding inevitable differences of opinion among philosophers, we're never going to all agree about anything at the end of the day, but we do get along very well on the whole as an international community. And I'd have to say, I hope you agree that we get along as a community of practitioners much more convivially than do many communities of academic philosophers who love to quarrel, who love to be at odds, and and all that sort of thing. So I've always found it a great pleasure to be associated with the movement, because I think we want to get along with each other in order to grow the practice. Do you agree with that assessment?
Those who want to get along are together. Those who do not want are not. So this is good as well, that they are not forced to do that for their careers. You have to have this liberty.
Sure. So let's go to some more substantive things. Firstly, I want to commend you for your productivity these last 10 years or so. You've been incredibly prolific. You've produced an enormous quantity of articles and other kinds of occasional pieces, in addition to the editing work, in addition to the amazing books that you have been churning out. So just let me point out to the participants, in case they're not aware, I have only a few of your books in front of me, but this was a breakthrough book, Humor in the Good Life. 2014, I believe. This was a fantastic book where we'll talk about your interest in humor in a minute, but you've managed to merge your interest with humor with philosophical practice in this book. And then, of course, you forged ahead as a pioneer of the philosophy of humor. You followed that up with an edited book, New Frontiers in Philosophical Practice. As a legitimate pioneer in the movement, Lydia, you're definitely well qualified to be opening those frontiers. Then, as if that weren't enough, you followed it up with Taking Philosophy Seriously, which is a really wonderful book revealing, I think, the breadth of your philosophical interest as well as the depth. I think you need to write a sequel to this one, which is, you might want to call it Taking Philosophers Seriously, because we're not all taken as seriously as we would like to be. So how did this stuff pour out of you? And then you become the editor and the founder of a field called Philosophy of Humor. You're editing a yearbook, right, published by De Gruyter. I contributed to it. It's a fantastic thing. And now you're editing two other series. You have a series on philosophical practice. Where did you find the energy, time, and motivation to be so productive of late?
Okay, thank you, Lou, for all that. First, let me say that there is another anthology that Alexander Fatigue was editing, and he offered me to co-edit it with him. And I'm deeply grateful, because he taught me how to do that by helping him first. And then everything I learned, I used again. So then I could understand that I could edit one myself. So I'm grateful to Alexander Fatigue for that. It was, I think, called Practicing Philosophy, and it was before that. And then before Taking Philosophy Seriously, there was another one, Rethinking Philosophers' Responsibility, 2017, which was important to present philosophical practice as a responsibility of the philosopher. And then there is a last one, 2021 or 22 in Routledge, about the legacy of Nietzsche's philosophy of laughter. So now the secret is that it's not of late. So I published, I think I was 24 or 5 when I published in English. I was an undergraduate and I already published. And I've published all my life. I was always writing. It took all these books. There is one most important, 2019, about the human condition. The most important. This is work that I did during 40 years. So I had articles, I've thought about that. I made research in many libraries. I waited till the things were ripe. But of course, to publish books when you are isolated, it's more difficult. So when I got advance contract, it helped me. It was as if people were saying, we would like to hear what you have to say, which is helpful. So I got that first advance contract, and it was very difficult for me to finish one book. So out of that book, I have 4. 5, 6. It's my defect that creates so many, because it keeps growing and growing, and I cut it in half and in half and in half. So it's a terrible process, but I learned to publish drafts. I accepted my imperfections. I didn't know any language good enough to publish in it. Take it into consideration. I didn't know English enough. Hebrew was not considered a language that you would like to publish in. I didn't know Hebrew well enough because I was a foreigner there. My French was from my childhood. And in Israel, when you publish in French, it's not considered academic enough. My Spanish is, folklorical. So my Latin, unused a little bit. I learned Latin for Spinoza. So it took me time. It took me time to polish a little bit my English, to teach in English, and to have this Tufts University around my neck that maybe let people offer me things. And the first book was sold out in 8 months. So from that moment on, people begin offering me and I began accepting. And then when you're being offered contract, you have to do the job. And so I began slowly and slowly more capable of doing that. That's all.
Well, that's a lot, and it's obviously not all since you have so much more yet to come. How did you get involved specifically with philosophical practice? What led you into the movement in its early days?
Well, there was no movement at the time. There were two people who were not talking to each other already, Shlomit and Ran. This was the situation. But I didn't know any of them. I was simply teaching philosophy outside of the academe as well, for my own initiative. I thought it was a university for older people, and I thought that they needed philosophy, but nobody wanted to let me teach philosophy. So everybody that ever learned that I can teach humor wanted humor. This is why I never told people that I can teach humor. So I began with humor with these people, and then through humor, I said to the director, the manager of the university, listen, these people need philosophy. What are you talking about? Nobody needs philosophy. I said, believe me, I'm teaching philosophy through humor. Let me try once. My responsibility. And I tried. I created a course, annual course of the history of philosophy, but taught from an existential point of view, a point that involves them. And it was a big success. And people were coming after class and telling me, that thing of Kant that you told me, I had one case. I remember my sister, but I had no time. I was, working for my livelihood. So I had to run to another conference. And I said, listen, I'm sorry, I have no time now. Here's my phone. Call me. And because that person called me, I said, well, let's meet. So this is when I began to have these private talks about their own relationship with what I taught and their life, this process from the abstract to the concrete and back. And then someone told me, the things you're doing is called now philosophical practice. And I say, is it? And then a journalist came and wanted to interview me, and she did. And in that interview, also Shlomit was there and Ran, and then Ran knocked on my door. And the rest, he said, okay, there's Shlomit, there is me. I want to create an association. And I said, yes, but let's invite Shlomit. He says, no. I said, I'm sorry, we cannot be three people and not talking to each other. This is ridiculous. This is a joke, So first manage the relationship, then we'll see. And they did not. So when Shlomit approached me, I said, I want to create an association. Is running it? He says, no. I said, then I cannot join, dear Shlomit. So that's it. That's the story.
Well, fortunately, we were able to hold the first international conference on neutral ground in Canada. So yes. people just showed up, but the reason why you're a pioneer, Lydia, is that you were practicing philosophy before it had a name. Before people called themselves philosophical practitioners, you had already started to do it, as did I in Vancouver. And we kind of coalesced into a movement, but it really began with people working. Very many of us were working in near isolation without realizing that there were a number of people doing this. And we have to credit Ran with pulling together the first program. You know, I raised the funds and had the ability to run the conference, but Ran and I were a good team initially because he knew the main practitioners in Europe and Israel and in Canada and the US. So we had a very successful debut. Ida was there, Vonna was there. There were, you know, a few people in the room who remember that. And this was really the beginning of a fantastic journey for all of us.
Yes, I want to say something about that, Lou, because recently my PhD advisor died. He's a great philosopher of science, Joseph Agassi, and he died in January. And when I studied philosophy, he was at Boston University, believe me or not. He was coming to Israel only for 3 months a year. And from the first year of philosophy, he presented philosophy to me as if whatever my heart desires is there. He presented philosophy as a practical thing. When I asked him, should I write a PhD on something that is more distant from me so that I won't be so involved and it will be easier involved, he said, only involved. When I tried to give him remote examples of passion, of Spinoza, whatever, he did not accept that. When I wanted, he wanted something more personal. When I wanted to write, use the terms that Spinoza uses, he forbade me to do that. He asked me to translate this into something that everybody would understand. So this was his import. My own thing is that when I began teaching at Tel Aviv University, I think I'm the only one that ever taught Hellenistic philosophies. Nobody heard of that. And I also invented something. I said that this peace of mind of ancient times in the West, that nobody knew that actually existed, imagine so many years ago. So for modern times, I said there is an ideal of redemption here and now, kindled by Spinoza, continued by Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and now I know even Santayana. So the rest of the course, the second semester was that, philosophy as redemption, you know. So I think that from the beginning, the way I approached the discipline was also practical because I saw it as very potent for me. And from the time I was even a child, I always thought that what is good for me is good for the others as well. I always shared. I always thought that what I knew, like the piano or a language or anything, everybody else can know as well. So this is the antecedents for me of that discipline that I always consider the most practical of all.
Right, which is why you're very unique, because of course most academic philosophers don't regard philosophy as being useful for anything. Rather, they want to mimic, you know, Poincaré's toast to pure mathematics. May it never be useful for anything, he said. And I think a lot of philosophers take that view of our discipline. One of the things, let me just ask you to speak to the ridiculousness of the human being, because you entertained and astounded us all. I forget which conference it was where you gave a wonderful talk. It was one of your early talks on Homo risibilis, yes, ridiculous, the ridiculous man. And it was such a wonderful insight because you did it with a compassionate heart, not in a mocking way, not in a disparaging way, but you were able to characterize our ridiculousness in a therapeutic way, encouraging people, as it were, to look in the mirror and see how ridiculous we're capable of being, as a way to actually, in some sense, seek redemption from our travails. Could you speak to that, please?
Yes, you know, this is also a very early thing. I just told to my friend Hortensia that came to stay with me that last month in Boston to ease a little bit my solitude. She's also a professor of philosophy. So I told her that actually I wrote my thesis on humor. I was 24, 25 as a seminar paper for Ben-Ami Sharfstein, who was a great East-West scholar, was the head of the department. And I wanted to impress him because I needed a direct path to the PhD. So I wrote an original thesis. It was called How to be Saved from Salvations. And I also presented that in an international conference immediately after. And it was a conference of humor, but it was an international conference. And I had this very philosophic paper. So the rest is only a development of that. And I had a twist, I think, when I was solitary in Finland, teaching in the woods. So everything can happen. So it got solved at a higher level and it developed into what it is in that book. But the idea was quite simple. It was, I think, using the humor that I have naturally, that I think it's the relationship between academic thinking or abstract thinking and practical thinking, because you cannot bridge them unless you have a sense of humor. I think this is what Schopenhauer offers, the difference between conception and perception, all right? And academic philosophers were always mocked, and theologians, if they were not practical enough. So bridging that life is actually not entirely rational, and you're supposed to think in very rational terms. I'm almost broke my life on this. I was very rational. It was very hard for me to bridge that. I couldn't live. And so I had to invent that humor in order to be harmonious in a way, like a Picasso painting. You know, I remained like that, but I needed all my parts. Also, the woman in me did not let me let her go, you know, and just be a philosopher. In the writings of the philosopher, it wasn't clear what to do as a woman to become authentic and a philosopher. I had to invent everything. So humor helped me not to break into pieces, you know, to accept that we do not coincide with one another, inside each other, inside of us completely. We do not coincide with the other person. We do not coincide with the world. And it took me the age of 40 to fully understand and accept that if you smile about that, there is no reason to be so tragic about that. Till the age of 40, I was a very tragic person. You know, that was it. It was my dignity. And then I realized something. Dignity, schmignity, my life is almost over. Yes, you have to find a way to do something with that. And then I found a way through humor to embrace those disparate parts of the human being, and these disparate parts between people and ourselves, and between us and the world, and embrace this incapacity actually to not be ridiculous, because we are supposed to continue doing things very seriously, but then they are not serious at the same time. So how can you hold them together as serious and non-serious? You know, a rational person loses the mind. You know, you hear 1 minute for breakdown, 1 minute, you know, the mind says that's over, that's finished, 0, 1, impossible, go back to mathematics. So in order to stay in philosophy, I had to invent this powerful philosophic tool, which is humor, what enables you to smile at that which is not funny. It's enlarging your capacity to hold together incongruities. Incongruities are tragic oppositions, but you can construe them as comical incongruities. And by that, instead of being very, very torn apart or tense by these opposites, you manage, you know, like a smile to bring them closer and to do very effective work with that, looking at all your facets together and incorporating them and smiling at that. Because, you know, humor is true and not true. There is an ambivalent attitude towards that. So you would like to have that, some part of yourself that come to consciousness. And this is, you know, for philosophical practice, an alternative tool to the unconscious, because through that tool, you got some aspects of yourself coming unnamed, ugly, you know, to the reunion, but still, is it me? Is it not me? Are they telling the truth or not? Through this ambiguity and ambivalence, you can actually embrace aspects of yourself that would not come to the fore consciously in philosophical practice. So it's a great tool for knowing oneself, for better deliberation, for living with conflict without resolving it, which I thought was important. And then I discovered in Finland for resolving it on a higher level. By embracing ridicule, you grace it. And if you grace your ridicule, you love yourself unconditionally, which is all that the religions actually offer. It's self-love.
It's wonderful, because it also becomes therapeutic in philosophical counseling. If the client, we're not telling jokes to our clients, but if we can help them to see themselves in this light, this ambivalent light, which is also partly ridiculous light, if they can laugh at themselves a little bit, it does elevate the whole process to a level at which it becomes therapeutic. And you're also presenting a really nice a sort of counterpoint to Freud's attempted, analysis of humor as part of the problem of the human condition. And I tend to see you as viewing it as part of the solution to the human condition.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, it's fair to say, but Lou, I have to pay you a compliment now. I'm sorry they say in English to pay a compliment. This is not nice, pay a compliment. But I remember that conference. You came with a lecture ready on Stoicism in the West and Buddhism in the East. And then you looked and you say, and you, Lydia, invented something new. You just heard it. This was wonderful that you said that. And in the conference that you organized in New York, after the one in Vancouver, you presented me to the people. I was terrified, and you said, I present you a great philosopher and a woman of the future. This is what you said. And I'm deeply grateful to you, Lou.
Well, thank you for having such a good memory, Lydia, because it ends up in my favor at this point. I honestly don't remember saying that, although I would certainly say it again. Even today, after all these years, you're still a woman of the future. So I think it's wonderful that you continue to philosophize. I have one or two more quick questions, and then I'm going to open the mic because we have some fantastic philosophers and also guests, and we were going to invite everyone who wants to interact with you to do so. So staying with humor for a moment, you've done a great job with Nietzsche, as well as Shaftesbury and Hamann and Kierkegaard in that other book. What is funny about Schopenhauer? Please enlighten us, okay? Schopenhauer appears not to have had such an amusing life. So how do you wrest humor from Schopenhauer's ethos?
Well, when you read Schopenhauer carefully, you see that it's not a tragic worldview, it's tragicomic, because it's true that there's a problem here because life is so comical in his eyes, it loses its tragic dignity. That's a problem, It's not only tragic, it's also comical. That means futile, That's the root of what you may call his pessimism. But he described things in a very funny way. And he was sure that the universe was actually making a big joke on our account. And he was very proud that he managed not to fall prey to that joke, to play his flute, to not have children, to manage to have this relationship with that actress without losing everything there. So he is quite a character. But through humor, I went into knowing various philosophers that I had no idea even existed, that I had no interest in their thought, like Kierkegaard, I don't know, Hamann. I became an expert on Shaftesbury. I have an encyclopedia entry on Shaftesbury now. People write to me now on Pascal. Apparently I'm writing a book on Montaigne. I went into French philosophy of the 20th century because of humor. I don't choose the philosophers. I find those that gave laughter or humor an argued place in the good life. I think I put to the fore the epistemic force of humor and the ontological force of it, rather than the light or the more funny aspect of it. So there's a work to be done here to show the relationship of philosophy with the comical. But I thought it would be a very quick book on my way to the Spinoza and Nietzsche. I would say to publishers, here I have a small book on humor and would you like it? They said, of course. And then they said, here I have Spinoza and Nietzsche. And I'm a very deep and profound and heavy philosopher. But that book that I wished would be short, it's taken me 25 years. I cannot get out of it. There's a lot of information. And apparently you cannot find it in indices. So I have to really read everything and to invent a field and create an association. And then the Greuter publisher said, now you need a journal. I thought he was joking, now you need a journal, now you need a book series. But apparently they were not joking. I have a journal, I have a book series, I have 250 members in that association, which is great. And for me, these are all aspects of philosophical practice. I have the Lexington Series in philosophical practice. They approached me. They wanted me to create that. So now we bring philosophy to the academe in a practical way, which is important. Otherwise, philosophy would not survive there. And if philosophy would not survive there, nobody would know in the future what it is or what it was. So there is this. Now, humor bridges the abstract with the concrete, the academic with the practical. So you have humor. Humor is only an elegant way for the human condition. So I have a series on the human condition. I want to rekindle the dialogue on the human condition in the 21st century. And now I'm working on the series on Spinoza, the legacy of Spinoza, because I think Spinoza is the most practical philosopher, and nobody knows that because he's too complicated.
Well, everybody in Holland surely knows it because rightly so, they're very proud of him, and his statue is still there in Amsterdam. I'm sure he hasn't been canceled yet. But Spinoza is not so well understood in the Anglo-American analytic world. Certainly, he is overlooked and probably marginalized. So you could do a great service by enhancing consciousness of Spinoza in the New World, definitely. One more question, Lydia, and I'm going to then invite our participants to open the mics and interact with you. You have shown over the years a great affection for Michel de Montaigne as well. And again, he's not a philosopher who's particularly studied as being, you know, a kind of a highlight in the history of Western philosophy. What to you is the importance of Montaigne, and how would you encourage more people to read and take him more seriously?
You know, this is yet another case in which I had no idea that Montaigne was related to what I was doing. I knew of Montaigne a little bit as a French person, but never, you know, paid a lot of attention to him. And when the first book was out, and it began with Shaftesbury and Hamann and Kierkegaard, now the second will be out. It's Montaigne, Nietzsche, Santayana, and Bergson, and the third is already out because they insisted on that. It's Nietzsche's the legacy of Nietzsche's philosophy of laughter, Bataille, Deleuze, and Rosset. So when I had a symposium on the book, someone from the Humor Association, a political scientist, said, you know, I believe it all begins with Montaigne. So I had to look, and I looked, and whoa, it begins with Montaigne. So I had to study. And then there was the corona here, and someone from Cambridge met me from Brill, and I didn't know what to offer them anymore. And they said, maybe you want something? And she says, yes, I would like a book on Montaigne. I said, okay. So this is how things go. So a book on Montaigne. I want to show that Montaigne reevaluates the value of philosophy at an early stage in life and criticizes in ways that are very, very modern in what he offers. And of course, I see him as a precursor of my Homo residualis thesis. I didn't know that. I think nobody knew that. He doesn't formulate that. But for Montaigne, there is an enigma, like he reaches peace of mind, nobody understands how. It's true that Homo residualis thesis equalizes everybody through that humorous outlook. So I would like to show that in the chapter on Montaigne and to write a book about Montaigne, finally, without any humor, to come back to very, very dry writing, no humor. I have a few books on Spinoza, Nietzsche, Rosset, Montaigne. I have a book for Lexington about meaning, happiness, and misery, you know, on the scope and limits of philosophy. So yes, I have that as well. You didn't know that I have that.
No, Lydia, you have more books than I can shake a stick at the moment. I mean, I don't know how many books you're writing simultaneously, but I'm looking forward to reading all of them. I think it's also fantastic that you're resurrecting Henri Bergson from who has fallen into a kind of oblivion undeservingly. He was a great vitalist, a great humanist. I think wasn't he also a Nobel laureate in literature?
Yes.
In any case, I'm really glad that you're going to reintroduce him to a contemporary readership. Kudos for that as well.
Thank you very much, Lou. Thank you. So I decided this time I won't tell people that I'm writing books so that they'll be published, because they'll get the wrong impression. I'm a humble, simple person. And now people say you have all these books. This is not a nice way. I don't want to be remembered in that way. So I won't tell anyone anymore anything.
Well, I'll just remind both of us and all the other authors, we have many authors in the room, some of whom are also quite prolific. So remember, Ecclesiastes said, to the making of many books, there is no end. Yes. So we also hope that to the reading of many books, there is no end. At least people should continue to read, even if we reach a limit as to what we can write on that happy note,
I just want to say in my defense, I don't have a normal community, you know, or in Israel or somewhere else, unless I create these communities through the writing and through these associations. Now I went into early modern or whatever they think I am, or now there is in Boston another conference in late modern, whatever. So I am having this conversation, these communities, which are here in order to help me when I will have to retire a little bit. So I have to write for that. What can I do? People do not know me naturally.
well, Lydia, I think you have developed a really wonderful path through the integration of philosophy and humor and writing and traveling and teaching, and you're a wonderful example to all of us in the practitioner community, even though you may deny it. I would like to open the floor. We have quite a few participants today who, and some of whom probably would love to interact with you. So go ahead, either raise your electronic hands if you wish to do that. And then I can acknowledge you and unmute yourselves. Would anyone like to ask Lydia any questions? Please go ahead. The mic is yours if you wish it. Okay, Hortense, yes, please unmute yourself. Go ahead. Please tell us where you're from.
It's okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I am happy. Well, firstly, thank you very much for this important meeting, this important interview to Lydia Amir, the great philosopher of the world. I think she always opened doors in the field of the philosophy. And it's amazing for me to know that she has had integrate different fields of philosophy in her job, in her work. And for that reason, I am happy to be here. Congratulations, Lou, and thank you for your invitation. And only a little question for Lydia.
¿Dónde están los huevos?
Please explain that. Please.
That's okay. Hortensia is in the other room. She's staying with me. And
she's in the other room.
Yes,
I asked her where she's calling from. She said, and you're telling me it's the other room.
It's the other room, but she's from Mexico.
The other room.
So,
where are you, Hortense? Where are you when you're not in the other room?
I am here, my big friend Lydia, and as always, I am thinking about that her told us, and I am proud about her interesting work. Is my feeling in this moment.
Thank you. What is your question for Lydia, please?
Yes, I know Lydia is an intellectual of the philosophy, but not always. Not always. You know, in this moment, my Spanish no. Excuse me.
You can ask her in Spanish if you wish. Go ahead.
And I will translate.
Hablemos español.
Sí. Puedes preguntar en español, Hortensia, después traduzco.
Sí, no. Yo sé que la filosofía práctica is a good way to cultivate philosophy. But I don't know what is the difference, for example, related with the philosophy of the ordinary life. It seems the same. But I don't know what is the difference, because since the point of view, the epistemological view, I would like to talk the difference between that philosophy, practical philosophy, and philosophy of the ordinary life.
It's the philosophy of the ordinary life. I was not aware that there was a field like that, but it's the same. But intellectually speaking, it's an interesting field in philosophy, because you have to think what of the history of philosophy, of what of the current things that happening in philosophy can be brought well to general publics. It need not be only of everyday life, ordinary life. It can be more complex problems. But how would you translate that to everybody? Can this be translated to everybody? And to approach these to not necessarily everyday's life. It can be more conceptual problems in the work, in business, in ethics. So it's about bringing philosophy to everybody.
Yes. Then it's an amazing job or work that the practical philosophy has. Yes, because it's possible to go around the world, and for that reason, the last question: how is the related the practical philosophy with human condition?
Well, for me, it's the same thing. This is what I went on creating a series. I think that philosophical practitioners actually, we are not psychologists, we are not psychiatrists. We are addressing the human condition that psychologists and psychiatrists cannot address and do not address and do not have the means and do not take notice of that. But we can and we should. So this is our agenda. Basically, it's our, I know, the agenda, we open the doors of the human condition by saying to people, welcome to the human condition when they come to philosophy. This is for me, you know, when we say, you have a problem with your friend, welcome to the human condition. Look, Aristotle had problems with friends. Look, Montaigne had problems with friends. Look, Blanchot had problems with friends. It's a universal question with various answers all over the world. So I think philosophical practice for me is welcome to the human condition. Have a tea.
Yes, thank you very much for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Hortense. I still think it sounds better in Spanish because it makes more sense when we say la filosofía para la vida cotidiana. It makes more sense when you talk to English-speaking people and talk about philosophy for everyday life, especially in the USA. People scratch their heads because it doesn't always, connect to their immediate circumstances.
Because they don't have an ordinary life in the United
States.
That's
why. Okay, that's why. So the ordinary life is in jeopardy.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a few more hands. Thank you, Hortense. Professor Özdemir, our Turkish colleague, welcome again. Ibrahim, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask Lydia whatever is on your mind.
Lydia, thank you very much. I am familiar with your work. I am from Istanbul originally. Now I am teaching at Clark University in Worcester. We are neighbors at the Boston area. But, you and Lou, you are pioneers of philosophical counseling, and always you are in such cases, there's a reaction in the name of tradition from academia. For example, I am new in the field, and when they ask me what you are doing, we are just philosophers. Or places is academia, at university. We are popularizing philosophy. Did you have such reaction in your life and career when you are you have been doing philosophical counseling for the years? I wonder that. Second, I also wonder, as you are also stayed in France, the impact of do you have any interaction with the Pierre Hadot's work? Thank you.
Yes. So let's begin with the first question, which is a very good one. Academic philosophy do not like philosophical practice. So if you want to have an academic career, don't talk about the rest of your life there. So because in the United States, I was told that they would laugh about it. I wanted to teach that there. But this was in the past. Now, if you go to APA's, American Philosophical Association conferences, you see that there are so many associations: public philosophy, philosophy for everyday life, philosophy for this, for that. So philosophy had came to its senses and understood that it needs also to work in the community and to address other people. Maybe a better word would be philosophical practice and not philosophical counseling. Then people are more open to that. And the question is intellectual. How can we practice philosophy? Now, most philosophers in the academy do not want to practice philosophy, which is interesting, and it's their right. They don't want to be ethical when they teach ethics. They don't want to be ontological when they teach ontology, or logical when they teach. Do you understand that? We cannot force that. So it's an interesting point of view that we may ask which theories can be emulated, can be embraced by our students, by ourselves, which not. Let's try it. It can be a personal path or a path you share with other philosophers, but it needs not be of interest to academic philosophers. And I understand why they may oppose to that. They do not recognize the importance intellectually of that field, which is how to create philosophies that would close the gap between academia and everybody else. That's the important. It's creating contemporary new philosophies that would offer new ideas of wisdom, new ideas of the good life that could be embraced in a global world by so many different people. This is what I'm trying to do. This is actually the mandate, the agenda. I think that, if we're ambitious, that we're thinking about practical philosophy, this is the question on the table, the global world. And about Pierre Hadot, I know the work of Pierre Hadot, and I'm glad you asked me about that. Pierre Hadot is a religious person that reads back into antiquity some spiritual exercises. There was no spirit in antiquity. There was a mind. It's very different. And he reads, for example, you won't find Epicureans in his writings. It's a certain reading of philosophy. So I'm not saying something bad about Pierre Hadot. It's very well known that he's a religious person, and there is a reason why he's looking back to antiquity for that. This was done in the past by Christianity. I think that a fresh look onto past philosophies with our own eyes is better. We don't need Pierre Hadot in order to do that, and we don't need, the French contemporary philosopher that was working with Gilles Deleuze. I forgot his name. That was very famous, and also talked about care of the self. And I said, do you need him in order to care for the self, or to look into ancient philosophy? But Pierre Hadot did an amazing job of showing that philosophy was practical. He called it spiritual exercises, but that they were exercises. So I'm now editing an anthology for a new field that I've created, or hopefully, I don't know, put on the agenda, called transformative philosophy, in which also Lou contributes, and in which I'm trying to find the main notions, not only historical, the main notions that makes philosophy being able to transform people. Yes. So, for example, imagination, will, awareness, experience, all these things were used in the past, and in the present can be used in order to make philosophy more potent. So this is what I think we should do today, and we shouldn't look at the history of philosophy as different from what we're doing today. It's an open question, and there are answers from the past, from the present, and from the future. As Lou says that I have a future, so a woman of the future. So
yes,
thank you.
You're persistently, Lydia. And just to add one thing to your answer, if I may, Ibrahim, we have encountered all of this, this pushback from the purely theoretical philosophers. I think the real difficulty we face is not with our students, who love the idea of transformative philosophy. Students love the idea that philosophy can be useful as well as a great intellectual pursuit. Every other discipline in the academy has pure and applied facets, right? You can study theoretical science or experimental science. You can study music composition or music performance. Everything in the humanities has this double-edgedness to it, except why doesn't philosophy have that? Because it got into the hands of people who wanted to remove it from the world and put themselves in a cocoon, and do purely analytic philosophy for its own sake. I call it theoretical philosophy, and it's absolutely fine as a theory about things, but the practical aspects have been missing. So what we've discovered in the US in the last 30 years is that a number of courageous philosophers who stepped forward and identified themselves as practitioners and got training and began to practice, they have now become chairs of departments. They have now become senior academicians, many of them, and they've been able to institute graduate courses, and they've been able to normalize the practice of philosophy as part and parcel of what philosophers do. So I only wish that one day, I think, Lydia, we've talked about this too, one day the word philosopher would mean somebody who operates across a spectrum and not mean someone who's remote and inaccessible. So the difficulty we face is trying to renormalize what philosopher means. That's a great challenge, is it not?
It is, and it's done every once in a while again, you know, the Renaissance philosophers, essayists stepped in. Every time philosophy is disconnected from everyday's life, you have those writers that try to bridge, because we all need that bridging of philosophy and everyday's life or current consent. So now we are doing that, and you can see it in the history of philosophy in Hellenistic times. They did that. The Academy of Plato and Aristotelian was still existent, but they did not answer the needs of the days. So yes, so I have nothing to add to what you said.
Okay, Jorn, you've been very patient. We'll invite our colleague from Berkeley. Jorn, please unmute, or Petaluma, California, but in any case, in the Bay Area, please unmute. Jorn, nice to see you.
Hi, Lydia.
Hi.
When you were talking about your music experience and your philosophical activities and interests, of course, I was thinking of other philosophers that had an interest in both areas. Of course, Nietzsche, and also like Albert Schweitzer. He was also in both fields, in the theory and, of course, you know, in practice, even medicine, and an active player, also a philosopher. More specifically, in this century, Theodor Adorno was also in both fields, less as a music performer, but a theoretician of music, and of course a philosopher, especially in aesthetics. So I was wondering whether you have any interest in Adorno, the field of aesthetics may have some interesting connections to humor, and of course music generally as a therapeutic medium.
So thank you, John. It's great to see you again and to hear this question. You know, we talked about Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer used to play the flute 1 hour every day, and he liked Rossini. So Nietzsche says a person who plays the flute every day and likes Rossini cannot be a pessimist, yes? And he, Rossini of all people, so he has put music in a special place, as you know. I would even say as one of the attributes of God, you know, one way of understanding the entire reality. So I would go back to Schopenhauer. I teach aesthetics. I tried to keep my artistic activities. I was dancing, I was writing poetry. I was trying to keep that away from philosophy as far as I could, because I said then I'm doomed. But till 40, I managed, then everything changed. So they wanted me to teach aesthetics, and I do that. And also in that Lexington series, there is an anthology edited by Jeanette, so Synod, I think she's called in Denmark, Jeanette Lagarde, yes, yeah. Knox, about philosophical practice and the arts, to which I think Vona contributed, and many people actually in philosophical practice and in philosophy, when you ask them, they actually need the arts. And some authors in literature can be called quite philosophical. You know, when you go to Russian philosophy, you need to read the great authors. Now, dance and music, I think, are deeply philosophical. There are things in music I understand better, and it's very difficult to put into words. Yes, and this is an interesting thing, maybe, to try to. I always thought that, you know, if you think of a music that would be suitable for Spinoza, it will be Bach, that perpetuum mobile. You know, I was trying to think of musical examples to show you the spirit of philosophers, but I would never have thought of Schopenhauer and Rossini. So thank you for your question.
maybe Schopenhauer and Rossini are an example of the blend of two opposing.
Yes, what you need it would be the contrary. Yes, what you will be needing in music will be the contrary mood. You will be needing in music a composer that offers you the contrary mood of your own mood.
Yeah, and Rossini was a 180-degree
Yes.
opposite of what comes through the pessimistic side of Schopenhauer.
Yes.
The lightness and playfulness, and I think this enabled him to create a balance and a nice mixture on a higher level, as you explained before, like almost a philosophical musical dialectic for him.
Yes.
Yes, the whole thing is becoming very Hegelian. We're now looking at a kind of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? So you can reframe this in a Hegelian way, if you wish. Jorn, thank you very much for that. I'd like to call on Giovanni Barno, our guest. Please, Giovanni, would you like to unmute yourself?
Thank you. Lou, thank you for this session and introducing the philosophical practice. I've heard much about this through a colleague of mine, but mostly through Lydia, a good friend. And it's a pleasure to be here to hear more about your research, Lydia, and your next projects, all of which I think will bring philosophy closer to the public sphere. My only comment has to do with when you think about philosophical practice, I think about medical practice, think about legal practice and business practice, and the extent to which that term philosophical practice has something along the lines that those other disciplines or fields have, and that is some service to offer. And I think, Lydia, given your background as broad as it is, through math and through music, not just, in fact, the theoretical portion of it, but actually being a performer, I think it's understandable then how you would see the world philosophically by trying to, in some ways, find that wedge or bridge that would bring that theoretical aspects of philosophy to the public sphere through humor. You mentioned transformative philosophy, and I see that what we all, I think, try to do in philosophy is to try to attend to those things which matter. And the breadth of humanity that we find in our classrooms is where I think we find all that matters. And I think humor, unresearched up to you, a pioneer, I think Lou is absolutely right, will give, I think, more of a bridge to those people to think about philosophy in a way that goes well beyond our classrooms. So I want to just, it's not a question, it's just a way of gratitude for this effort that you're taking on, Lydia.
John, how did you hear about this meeting? You know, Lou said, let your crowds or communities know, but I sent it to no one, you know. Hortensia knew because she's here. I sent to people in Israel, it's the middle of the night there. I only my friends. I didn't advertise that. I felt, it's not even a lecture to whom. And here you managed to be. When they said that people helped me grow up, Ida and others, so John, whom I met in China, of all places,
Yeah.
he was he was the president of the International Association for Value Inquiry. And everywhere we had these conferences, he was listening to me patiently, my ideas, my thoughts, my criticism. He was educating me. And in World Congresses of Philosophy, this association gave me opportunities to talk about topics, I don't know, nuclear weapons, whatever, that I had never tackled before. I was terrified, but he really educated me for 25 years. I met Hortensia in China in that hotel, and John, and John was closed at a certain point at the beginning of the association in the United States, I think, of philosophical practice, and he did valuable work with the homeless people.
Mhm.
So practical work they did, and he's going to write a book for the Lexington series about fortitude, which is important to write to enrich the public with in-depth work about different virtues. What does it mean in today's life to have this kind of virtue? Yes, I think this is what you meant.
That's right. And you're always so very generous as to what impact I've ever had on you. But I appreciate that as much as Lou is willing to receive that as well. I think you have well exceeded any of the learning you may have given me credit for. And it's just wonderful to be able to see your achievements and the next projects that you're taking on. That'll help everybody.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, John.
Thank you also, John or Giovanni. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Buffalo, New York. And,
okay, upstate. You're upstate.
I am upstate. Yes, indeed, on the lake.
He's the best friend. He's the best friend of that poet that you have as your co-director.
George
Yes.
Hole,
George
our
Hole.
colleague. Yes, of course.
Do
you know George?
George and I are very good friends and have been for many years. And he's the one who told me about the meeting.
I thought so.
Yes.
Good. Well, welcome. It's very nice to meet you, and thank you for joining us today.
Nice.
We have
Thank
more
you, Lou.
hands up. Okay, let's move on. Robert, you are next. Hi, Ida. We'll get you on too. And let's go to Robert. Your hand is up, so please unmute and tell us where you're from, and then go ahead and ask Lydia whatever you like.
Good evening. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm from Serbia. I teach philosophy in high school in Serbia, one of the many high schools. And here I am because of Alexander Fatic, who invited me, and I am grateful. I'm here for the first time. Now I'm asked the question to Lydia, the practical question, because it is philosophical practice in what is it all about. And sorry for my English, I'm a little bit clumsy with my English. I want to ask a question, how relate humor and intention to be humorous in order to bring meaning to philosophy or everyday life? I don't know if you understand me. Relation.
Yes.
Yes. Then I don't need to speak further.
I understand you. I don't teach humor in my philosophical practice unless I'm being asked to do that. I just have another method, person tells me whatever interests them or bother them. I pick up a question. I ask the person to pick a question. If the question is philosophical, we together find a few answers, formulate answers to that question, and then we criticize each answer and go to the next question, related or unrelated to that question. But if a person is interested in a humorous outlook, which actually comes naturally out of deepening the tragic, if you deepen the tragic, naturally, either you are not going to make it or you are going to discover the comical. It's a survival mechanism. And once you accept what? Accept that life is as it is. When you become more tragic, accept the injustice that life is. When you fully understand that, you understand that there is something comical in the tragic attitude, but you cannot teach that to anybody else. Someone who has been injured, who has been raped, who has been killed, civil war. You cannot address this lightly. It's not about that. It's a personal tool of survival, only internal tool. This is what I do. I don't use humor to lighten up situations outside. It's an internal tool, a new model of rationality that I hope to offer that takes also contradictions and tensions into account. Because the old model of rationality, it's either or and cannot withstand contradiction. Now, if we have practical philosophers, we have philosophic thought that is abstract and rational, and everyday's life, which is not. So how do you bridge them? So you need a tool that can handle contradiction. And the human being is a living contradiction. So I'm using that tool internally in order not to lose any aspect of my contradictory being. Yes, I will send you the article that explains how to use that internal tool of humor if you want. It's not very funny, but it's accepting the incongruities or the contradictions in you and working with them.
Yes, if I understand you correctly, that we can say that this accepting or staying with the fact is that which brings this tragic to transform into something better.
Yes, it transforms, but it keeps everything that was in the tragic, yes. Every information. But because it makes it lighter, you can access the information.
Yes,
so this is deeply important from an epistemological point of view. You get to know better the human condition, and to sustain more information, you don't run away from it, because you know there's a way out in a way, if you want a little bit. So you can stomach more, which is what is important, not to run away from the real situation. Yes, so by having that, it's like digesting heavy meals, you know. It's
yes. It is hard to digest, but it is good after that, and it is good that humor is not a means that you bring outside.
No, it's an internal tool that makes you more flexible instead of breaking.
Yes, I understand. Thank you very much.
It bridges intelligence and emotion and motivations, you know, and it bridges various emotions and various desires that are at odds and contradict each other. So it enables a plurivocal, you know, self, not univocal, and not reason that actually governs the rest. It's you hear all the voices inside you. It's a complex tool, yes, but it's humor. It's not sarcasm. It's not wit. It's not irony. It's humor. It's compassionate, and because it's compassionate, it enables you to accept part of you and on the human condition. This is where Montaigne comes through you, that before you would have rejected. So by its aggressive compassion or compassionate aggressiveness. So it's the main tool of self-education, which for me is what philosophy is.
Yes, I understand completely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lydia. That was great. We have another hand up. Patricia, our dear friend Patricia, had her hand up. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Lydia. I must admit that I was almost deciding to go to bed because today had very, very long day and I was so tired, but I was so happy to hear you, to listen to you. So I decided to participate to Agora, and I'm happy to be here. So it's almost midnight from Italy here, but I'm absolutely happy to to have listened to you as always. And yes, this last thing that you have pointed out, the humor as a gentle, as a compassionate tool, I totally agree with you. And it can be a very useful tool with our clients as well, to invite them, to transmit them this way of accepting life as it is. Chaos and order. You see, when they are confused, they have to accept the contradiction and to live inside and to manage them and to swim inside. I totally agree with you. And another question that I wanted to pose you, Lydia, is about this new direction that you are researching and you're going into, the transformative role of philosophy, of practical philosophy. And I always, I'm questioning about this. Don't you think that sometimes the power of transformation of our philosophical way to transmit and to share with people is more than on philosophy, on the matter, is more on the person who transmit. I mean, even a theoretical academical teacher, professor, can be transformative if he or she has the ability to transmit and to pass and to share, as you have done, passing from mathematics and aesthetics and music and philosophy and practice, to transmit the passion of questioning life as it is using philosophy. I mean, you can be a bad teacher teaching medicine or chemistry or philosophy because your students don't get anything apart from books and theory, or you can be transformative even if you decide not to teach practical philosophy, but just theoretical philosophy. Don't you think that? I don't know.
Yes.
It's a question that I'm following this last, I mean, I see many practical philosophers that are not practical. I don't know if you understand I mean, I see, because they are in Italy, they are flourishing, but in this moment, I see many practical philosophers that are very theoretical, and many theoretical philosophers that are very effective in life, they really try to transform their life and the world and the people they are connected. I don't know if I'm clear,
Yes.
but the problem of practical philosophy is that can be more theoretical than the opposite. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Patricia. This is why I wanted this concept of transformative philosophy, not only in the present, but also in the past, to be brought to the fore, because it's an interesting question. And of course, we forget an important public, our students. The communities also our students. They are not necessarily those who are in the academy. They are not necessarily or in our school. They are not necessarily philosophy students. They come from many other disciplines and take one course or two or introduction to philosophy. And the way you would bring philosophy to them and the way you embody it and the way you let yourself be transformed by it, by even what they say and what you read and on the spot, by being accessible. So they, of course, unless there is this friendship, in the contact, and unless you they call it vulnerability. I really don't know what it is. So if you love philosophy, basically,
exactly.
So
it's passion.
It's passion, and it's within all of you, the body, the soul, the thing. You love it. You get enthusiastic. So this is the best ambassador for saying that philosophy is practical, being enthusiastic about it, being bewildered by the questions or by an opportunity. Be a learner all your life, actually. This is what it's about, yes, to continually being transformed. And philosophy is very daunting in that way, because many professors and students do not want to be transformed by that. Come on, they have to go tomorrow to work. They have a wife, they have children, they have everything. Who is going to be transformed? I used to have children who was holding their chairs when I taught Nietzsche, so that they won't be transformed by that. So this is where humor comes about, because philosophy actually attacks your most cherished values. And you cannot do it directly most of the time, because you need sometimes something that would soothe people. This is why I think that Socrates is inherently comical and was considered ridiculous. He was using the laughter he was arising in order to redirect that laughter towards society and saying the ridiculous is not me, is those others. And he was using that to bring people closer to philosophy. So philosophy basically would be accepting to transform your values, to think more deeply about yourself, of what is accepted. And it's very threatening. Every time there's a threat, humor comes to mind, sometimes as a way of closing that, but sometimes it can be used to open up that possibility. And as you said very clearly, in case you are yourself being transformed with what is being said to you in the classroom or by another person. So as you said, it's not the intellectual versus the practical, the academic versus the counseling. It's more about how transformative are you willing to be? And you know, it's not a question of age, because as we age, we're going to be sick. If we're lucky, otherwise we die young. We are going to die, I think, you know, although it's not proven. So you will need to be transformed by that very humbly, and to accept to learn new tricks and new values. And this is what philosophy is about. And about the, yeah.
Lydia, thank you. We're getting very close now to time. So it's getting even later in Europe as we speak. We have so many I'd love to hear from, but we'll have to come back next month. May I just invite Ida to say hello? It's been so long since we've seen you, Ida. I mean, Vaughna's in the room and others who know you well. Could you unmute, please, and just say that you're doing well and fine in Amsterdam? It's so nice to see you again. Do you have something you want to say to Lydia? Go ahead. We'll give you the last word. Try again, Ida. Try and unmute. There you go.
There I am. I really like to see you all and the people I haven't seen for so long. So it's really funny. And I'm glad I'm here, because I was kind of fed up with the word philosophy, the practical philosophy, and all the bullshit around it. So I didn't do a lot for a few years. And now I came back today, and you don't believe it. Today I was starting at 9 o'clock in the ESVW, you know, the ESVW where we had the conference. And I have to say hello from Dries and all the people there, because the first day I was in this practical philosophy meeting the whole day. So it's now, it started at 9 o'clock and now it's almost 12 for me. So I was really into philosophy today again. And I'm very curious, because I hear a lot of stuff and I see that still the Dutch are kind of out of the picture of all the what you all saying, because we have public philosophy in university now. Today there were 100 people in our conference in this small country who were all doing something with philosophy in the practical way, you know. And what confuses me, and therefore I also like to, what Patricia said, it's the same here. I hear a lot of people tonight, all of you, talking about all the theories. And I think in Holland, we want to talk about what you do, not with students and not with the books and not with the theories. We want to know what you do with the people in the streets. And I didn't hear anything there. And I think that's what we try to do still in Holland. How can you get to the people, the normal common people in the street with philosophy? And that is really something what I think we should really pay more attention to. Otherwise, we have a kind of, we are sitting in our own kind of bubble. So I don't, the problem is I don't want to criticize, because you are a dear, you did beautiful things, Lou too, Fauna too, I all love you. But, you know, I think it's time, maybe it's not good for me, the last speaker, but I think a little criticize here and there should be okay, I think.
We depend on you, Ida. We love the Dutch, who have a reputation for being candid. Some people say blunt, but I think you're candid and you speak your minds and hearts, and you're great pioneers. Vana is working with homeless people, so just to you'll sleep better tonight.
I know Vana still,
Okay,
yeah.
as long as you know you're in touch, but we're still doing it. But we are now talking the talk today. But believe me, we're
Okay.
still walking the walk. Okay.
Good.
I hope to see
Okay,
you-
good.
I hope to see you in Romania.
I
My
tried to
friends,
go there. Yeah, I tried to go there.
Try.
Yeah.
You have a short hop. We have to fly.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Okay, well, if we do, Ida, it will be wonderful to see you in person and have a drink.
Okay.
My friends, thank you so much. I want to take a shot of everyone. Let's get a gallery view. So everyone, if you want to smile, let's go and let me take a picture. 1, 2, 3, everyone smile, okay, for the camera.
You do it.
That's it. We have a picture of everybody. Thank you so much for joining today and for being part of this. A special thanks to Lydia for really wonderful presentation, wonderful answers to the questions, Lydia. Thank you so much for that. Next month, we'll be back. It'll be on the 20th of May. We're going to welcome Rick Rapetti, who's going to be our featured guest. Rick is all over the street and all over a lot of streets too, as well as being a professor. So Ida, maybe you'll come back and get to know Rick better too. But thank you all so much. I hope those of you who didn't chime in today will come back and chime in next month. We want to hear all voices. That's what APPA is about. We're inclusive and have been since inclusivity became a fad. We were already inclusive. So anyway, thank you and be well, be safe, be philosophical. We'll see you all soon. Thanks, Alexander, also for everything, and all of our friends. Come back next month. And
thank you very much, Lou. And thank you
Lydia,
for creating the
thank you.
Agora.
It's been great to have you. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, take care.
Okay,
Until we
take
meet
care.
again. So long.